Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Times Google Hangout. This is Tony Evans. I'm in damp London, and in Sao Paulo we've got Matt Dickinson, and in Rio de Janeiro we've got Gabriele Marcotti. How are you this morning, chaps?
Great, Tony. Yeah,
very well.
Damp here.
Yep. Well, let's cut to the chase. Spain going out last night. One, what did you make of it? Was it a shock? And is it the end of tiki-taka, the end of a philosophy? Matt?
No, well, it's the end of an era in terms of Spain's dominance, clearly. I mean, three major tournaments in a row, which was unprecedented. Not even the great Brazil teams managed to pull that off. So I think the first thing we should do is just acknowledge their unprecedented success, which not only brought trophies, but colossal admiration. I mean, I wrote a couple of weeks ago that they were Barcelona light in some ways. I don't think they ever quite, even in those tournament victories, quite established the slickness, the panache, the sense of sort of groundbreaking football that Barcelona did as a club. But it was transferred brilliantly to the international stage with a few tweaks. Obviously, you lose Messi and you stick in Casillas and Ramos and others from Real Madrid. And say they did what no other international team has done before. So I say first thing after first, I think we should acknowledge that. Equally, then we have to acknowledge the brutality of the end. It was a smashing by Holland, clearly, and it felt pretty much a smashing by Chile as well. It's funny how these eras, we see a great team and we wonder how it will end, and it always does. But I don't think many eras have ended quite as spectacularly. They're not imploded quite so spectacularly as this Spain has, and there are numerous causes for that. But clearly the pace of the way that they were playing seemed a lot slower. It seemed a loss of energy as much as anything.
Gab, everyone else has evolved tactically. Did Spain stand still a little bit?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I agree that everybody else has evolved tactically. I think some teams have tried. No, I think he brought in. If you look at this arc over the three major championships, I mean, I think he tried to bring in new elements. But in the end, and then if you think back to the Confederations Cup, he tried with the one holding midfielder. That didn't quite work out. He tried the two holding midfielders. I think in the end, this time around, I was there last night, and he said, we were so prepared, I can't explain what went wrong. I think it was a case of individual mistakes dictating things. I think if David Silva puts that chance away against Holland, I don't know that we're having this conversation right now. It's the end of a group of, or it's the end of a certain idea, I think, as Dicko said, of a certain style of football as played by this Spanish national team. But that said, I don't. I think most of these players will be back. Obviously, no more Xavi, no more Xabi Alonso, no more David Villa, possibly, hopefully, no more Fernando Torres. But by and large, though, I think these are very good players. This is still the most talented group in Europe, if not the world, extending down to the youngsters pushing to get in. And I think all it takes is a few tweaks and a few little updates. Hey, the thing is, Rich, just remember this: they weren't beaten. Like, they deserved to lose those two games, but they were not beaten by better teams. They were beaten by better coach teams on the day, teams that could elevate, that had superstars who could raise their game on the day. But they weren't beaten, I think, by actual better, deeper teams, more gifted teams.
Oh, I mean, Matt, do you agree with that? I mean, do you think it's a case of, instead of this whole philosophy of tiki-taka, the whole, sort of the Barcelona production line, do you think it was just a case of Spain and Barcelona getting lucky with this group of players who could play in that style, and as they've aged and as they've gone past the peak, so does the style disappear? It's less about philosophy as about, sort of luck, people coming together at the right time.
Well, obviously Spain have cashed in effectively on that Barcelona dominance. It's not saying entirely that, but that was the root of at least half the team, and certainly certainly at the start, the philosophy saying there were necessary tweaks to it because you lose Klein or Messi out of the team. That's a big loss from how Barcelona set up. But it was, I mean, we've seen the wheel turn at Barcelona, haven't we? A few years ago at the peak under Guardiola, you looked at them and just thought, you looked at the youth, relative youth of a lot of the team, and thought, what is ever going to bring this down? And it's funny how. Alex Ferguson has said it, talked about 3 or 4 year cycles being the maximum. Other coaches have talked about this sort of, the intense difficulty of keeping a cycle going beyond 3 years. It's, it's part of sport, isn't it? And it's what stands out the great champions in any sport, that they manage to stay on top. And it's this recycling. And the funny thing with Spain is, as Gab says, Spain have tried to recycle. That's the funny thing. Diego Costa came in. And that's why, I certainly thought, I didn't think they'd win it. I didn't actually think they'd get to the final, but I thought they would reach the latter stages because you could see a certain evolution, and Diego Costa was coming in, which meant they suddenly had a proper striker. But actually, as it turns out, that didn't work at all. He had a poor tournament, whether he was quite fit after the injury we know he had at the end of the Atletico season. So, we thought they were evolving. We thought, this would be a tournament where Silva, say, comes to the fore more than Iniesta, or they've got the players there, but it just shows this. I mean, it's the chemistry of sport, isn't it? It's the hunger, it's the drive, it's the maintenance of motivation, which is ultimately you have to be found wanting by a little bit. A couple of things go your way, a little bit of belief drains away, and suddenly you're being kicked out of the tournament after 2 games.
Well, the interesting thing is Spain were undone, especially against Holland, by pace, which brings us neatly onto England. It seems to me that teams that do well in tournaments like this are teams with a lot of pace and who are very direct. England have got that. Do you see it coming to the fore against Uruguay, Gab? Do you think this is the time when Roy Hodgson's team impose themselves on the tournament?
Honestly, I don't necessarily see why that would happen. I mean, in many ways, you would imagine that they match up well against Uruguay. Uruguay issues of discipline, Uruguay issues of lack of pace. Although in some ways maybe I think that's overplayed too. I know Diego Lugano's out, but if I played Martín Cáceres back there, I have somebody who's as fast as any England striker. If I played him in the middle, of course, instead of at fullback. But I don't know. I just find it kind of extraordinary how after a defeat where your opponents hit the woodwork twice, all of a sudden it's like, well, we're ready to impose ourselves on this tournament. Newsflash, something goes wrong here today. And Luis Suarez scored a lot of goals against English defenders in the English Premier League this year. Something goes wrong today. You're going home like Spain, with the difference that you don't have, you never won anything, unlike Spain in recent years. So I feel a little bit. I like being positive about England, but a bit of a reality check here. You have no point thus far.
I agree with you, Gab, in the sense that I thought the reaction to the defeat by Italy was far too positive. I mean, what bothers me is that, you've got Rooney and you've got Welbeck, and they're playing ostensibly as attackers, but playing in negative roles. Matt, do you think he's not making enough, Roy Hodgson, of the abilities he's got, and he's not putting people in the right positions?
Well, I think we'll see more people in the right positions tonight. I mean, we understand that he's going to play Rooney at number 10, which I think is the right thing to do. I think that'll put Welbeck at left, where I think he's as a narrow winger, which I don't think should lose anything from his capabilities. So you look at the team that will play tonight, and I think that's pretty much everyone in the positions that they would. Hope for themselves, so there can't be any complaints on that score. I mean, I know what you're saying about whether it was too positive. You lose the game 2-1 and everyone sort of gives the team a round of applause. I think it was just much the fact that it was an entertaining game. I honestly think that. I think we've had too many major tournament matches, and this might sound, sort of clutching a pretty, in too many tournaments, just games where England have just looked to be playing a different sport from top international sides, and they're the ones playing football, and we're playing you know, something from a different era. And I think it was the fact that England looked like they were engaging in a good football match. And I say, that's not like, feels like small mercies after some of the tournaments we've been through in recent years.
Gab, according to the team that most people predicted today, there's only two proper midfielders in there, Steven Gerrard and Henderson. Can they win with two midfield players and essentially a lot of attackers who are forced to track back and cover in the midfield?
It's a good point. I mean, if you saw Chile last night, they had only one defender, right, and two holding midfielders playing in central defense. So maybe we're ascribing too much to positions. On paper, the way you would see this panning out would be, you know, if England attack, you can get away with those two. It's not as if Portugal like Walter Gargano, people like that in midfield. It's not like they've got, you know, some tremendous attacking force. And I think Portugal will also want to be, you know, get the ball to the strikers pretty quickly. I do think as the tournament wears on, though, it will become an issue tactically, depending on the opposition. I thought that against Italy, Gerrard and Henderson sat very, very deep, which is fine in a game like that against an opponent that plays possession. Against an opponent that takes a different approach, like we might expect Uruguay to do, I'm not sure that's the right thing. That could be an issue. As long as there are adjustments elsewhere, you can get away with it. I think the question, Tony, and I'll turn this to you, is how much faith, as an England fan, do you have in the ability of people like Rooney, Welbeck, and Sterling to sort of adjust on the fly if the two midfielders behind them are in trouble?
I think that's a question for Matt. Matt, do you have faith in the likes of Rooney, Welbeck and Sterling to adjust, drop back into midfield and cover the danger areas when Uruguay have got the ball?
Forgive me if I missed some great analysis by Gab. For a couple of minutes, but do I have as a case? Sorry if I'm overlapping, but as a case in the Italy game for playing a different formation that bolstered the midfield. If ever there was a game when England maybe should have played 4-3-3, which I'm sure would have quickly become 4-5-1. It was actually in that first game where maybe there could have been some help for Henderson and Gerrard. Now that opportunity has been missed, I don't think there's much choice than to stick with, which hopefully will put more action on the attack while effectively. I just think that Italy very shrewdly managed to that channel with Leighton Baines. They spotted a weakness there. They just gang up with.
I think Matt's got a really bad connection there, Gab. Do you think that one of the problems that Hodgson has, he's desperate to get Wayne Rooney into that team, whichever way he can, and do you think he's got the right balance? I'm not so sure he has. I'm not so sure Rooney is ever his most effective in the sort of positions that Hodgson's playing him, and I'm not so sure he's in good enough form or fitness.
I would tend to agree with you. If this were a club team, you might look at Rooney and say, okay, well, he's not an ideal fit for this right now, so let's sell this guy, buy that guy, and move it around and find the right mix. But this is a national team, and this is a short tournament, and you have to, I think, get your best players on the pitch unless they're incredibly disruptive or unfit, or just simply aren't productive. And I looked at the absolute hammering that Rooney got in the press. I looked at the whole week of Rooney obsession. Even Frank Lampard came out and said, why are you all so fixated on Wayne Rooney? and you have this issue with Rooney fixation, and Colleen, and her luggage, and should we drop him? And let's go ask Jose Mourinho what he thinks about Wayne Rooney. Enough.
I agree, enough. But enough about the luggage and Colleen. Rooney's got enough baggage on the pitch that you don't have to bring his wife into it. But the reality is, he didn't play very well at all on Saturday night.
He didn't play very well. He didn't play very well. Who? Rooney? Rooney set up a cross. Rooney set up the goal, the only goal that England scored, with his left foot on a 2-against-4 counter-attack. I don't know how many other English players could have done that in that game. On top of that, it's not like I'm leaving Rooney out because I'm bringing in Kevin Keegan and Gary Lineker. No, I'm leaving Rooney out because I'm bringing in Ross Barkley, who spent most of last season under David Moyes, spent most of last season in the Championship, or I'm bringing in Adam Lallana, who's 26 years old and only made his debut when back in November. Or I'm bringing Jack Wilshere, who's always injured. I mean, let's think about this a little bit. Of course you accommodate Rooney.
I'll agree with you that Rooney set up the goal, but I'll also say to you, England lost. So before we get overexcited, and he didn't have a very good game. And the thing is, he was playing a position where he was supposed to protect the full back, and they were doubling up every time on Baines. But Matt,
the stats show that Rooney did the most miles, and the fact is that I think he had a tough time. I think it was not easy for him, but the idea that he was more responsible for England's defeat than anyone else, I think, is entirely unfair. I mean, I think the fact is that they were.
Well, he wasn't responsible for England's defeat. Roy Hodgson was responsible for England's defeat for playing them in a position that didn't suit him. But that's a different issue. The problem is,
why can't Leighton Baines be responsible for England's defeat? Well, why not Leighton Baines? Why can't he be responsible for England's defeat?
Because what you do is you try and set up a team with balance where you protect your weak areas. And it was clear that Italy were flooding down their right and were doubling up on Leighton Baines. You've got to adjust to that. That's what managers are for.
They should have adjusted more, but they tried to adjust by slipping over Welbeck, who, to be honest, does do his defensive work and does it very diligently. And the fact is that he was playing left wing and supposedly helping out Baines when the goal went in. So that wasn't part of Rooney's.
Matt, isn't that the core of the problem for England? We're talking about Welbeck, who's an attacker, doing defensive work.
Yeah, but if they, ultimately, if they take a choice that they're going to absolutely flood down that side, and as I say, it wasn't just a 2, it wasn't just 2-on-2. The fact is that Rooney talked about it afterwards. It showed a bit more tactical insight than maybe some people will give him credit for. That ultimately they were also drifting over, not often Verratti, just to basically, cause him a dilemma. Now, it goes back to my previous point about actually, hindsight a great thing, and I'm slightly surprised they didn't do it, because I know Gary Neville has talked extensively about England being overrun in midfield. So many different tournaments. He's been an advocate a lot of the time for I think for more like a 4-3-3 setup. And if ever there was a time England probably should have looked at that, knowing the strength of Pirlo, knowing the strength of De Rossi, knowing that Italy's strength was in central midfield, it was probably that game. Now, would it have changed everything if you put in Wilshere or maybe Phil Jones even as a very defensive midfield option? Who knows? But if ever there was a game to try, it's that one, and that may well have been a mistake.
Gab, tonight we've got Uruguay, obviously, and Suarez, the man with a grudge against the FA. How do you see that pan out? 1, is he fit? 2, will he be effective against our England defence?
I don't believe he's fit in the sense of being 100% and match fit. I do think that Suarez and Cavani present all sorts of very serious matchup problems for England. I think part of it is simply psychologically. You are playing against a guy who was the outstanding player in England this season, and you're going to do it with Glenn Johnson and Leighton Baines as your fullbacks, which means that they'll probably need help. They'll need guidance. I think it's a great position to be in. On the other hand, you're also talking about Uruguay, who, of course, have serious disciplinary demons. You really don't know how they're going to react after the hammering they took from Costa Rica in the first game. And I think that to me is one of the keys. Beyond that, I think this is a really veteran team. All those stereotypes people talk about, dark arts and all this stuff, it all applies to Uruguay. I think England are going to have to be strong mentally. They're going to have to be clever. If they do decide to go and take dives, Danny Welbeck, they have to make sure that they're not obvious cheats, because otherwise that'll get you in trouble in a game like this. In fact, I actually hope that there's no diving and cheating at all from some of the English players, because maybe I'm old school, but I do tend to consider it not part of your game. I think England can win, but you need to prepare for this game. You need to prepare for this game differently than the way you prepared for Italy, I think.
Matt, what are the 3 keys to England winning? And after that, your prediction for tonight?
Well, I'll start with my prediction. We do a sweepstake before every England game, all the guys on the road, and I've actually gone for 2-2. I can't see it being goalless. I think there will be a lot of action, and I'm predicting Uruguay to take the lead, and we'll scramble back and get a 2-2 draw. As Gab said, I mean, it's interesting. Steven Gerrard and Roy Hodgson talked quite a lot yesterday about just getting this defensive balance right. I think they feel that they can scare Uruguay. I think they feel that they can be more clinical with the finishing. I think there will be times when with players like Sterling and with Sturridge that they can get behind the Uruguay defence, and they've got to be far more ruthless with those cutbacks. There was a few times against Italy the ball flashed across goal, just wasn't delivered to feet, and they need to be better than that with those. But at the same time, ultimately they've got to get more solidity to protect the back four, which is a weakness. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's it won't take a lot of, as Gab says, one-on-one matchups between Cavani and Cahill for Uruguay to create chances and potentially cause some major damage. So I'm going 2-2. I think it'll be a great game. To be honest, I think the weaknesses on both sides might make it a great game.
Gab, your prediction for tonight?
I'm with Matt. I actually predict a lot of goals because of the inherent weaknesses on both teams. In some ways, the way England-Italy was a good game for the neutral, because both teams, I think, aren't very good defensively. So I'm going to go a 3-2 Uruguay.
I think I'll go the opposite way for you. I think I'll go 3-2 England, and they'll prolong the agony into the last game against Costa Rica. But moving on, what's it been like being in Brazil, Matt? You wrote a great piece about the ambience in Copacabana and the people sort of living in vans, travelled up there living in vans. What's the whole atmosphere been like? Just can you give us a sense of the mood right across Brazil? Because you've been travelling around from Manaus to Rio and now Sao Paulo.
Yeah, well, I mean that Copacabana experience is as I wrote, is exactly what you sort of dreamt the World Cup should be. Gabs just said he hates Copacabana, but the fact is that I defy anyone to go there, and it will wash away your cynicism. You even see a fan fest with FIFA slogans about everyone dancing to the same rhythm or whatever the ridiculous trademark is, and this is going to sound horribly cliched, but you walk down the beach and it is made real. There are England fans sitting in a bar with Argentinians singing songs. There are Chileans banging drums. It is a 24-hour party, and I have to say, without sounding too smug, for England to have based themselves there is a treat. You come to Sao Paulo, it's a completely, obviously, different place, different city, different environment. There's not that ability in this city to gather fans together in the same way. Manaus was different still. There is a beach by the river there, and there was a fantastic fan festival there. I mean, overall, I think it is living up to everything we hoped it could do. The football's been great, and I sort of speculated half tongue-in-cheek the other day whether the sort of magic of Brazil is bringing the best out of the footballers. And you speak to the England players, they say being in Brazil is different, is special. You want to, you feel that extra motivation to give of your best. And I say maybe I'm getting carried away, romantic, and I've been on the caipirinhas too much. But I have this lovely idea that being a World Cup in Brazil is bringing the best out of the football community so far. Anyway, and fingers crossed. Let's hope it lasts.
Gab, I'm sitting here in London, it's overcast, the natives are hostile, life's terrible. You're like the king of Rio, aren't you? You're in a palatial mansion there. Tell us what it's like, that experience.
Well, first of all, Tony, I can tell you right now, it's absolutely bucketing down with rain. Okay, so
I could cry
first of all,
I could cry for you.
You've got better weather than I do, but listen, I agree. It's fantastic. You walk down the street, everybody here is a football fan. I'm talking about the locals, and I have a different experience from Dicko because I'm not living in Copacabana. I'm living in a more residential area.
Your palatial mansion.
And so, yes, it is. But we don't have all these tourists and Englishmen with their shirt off, sunburned, stomping around on the beach and so on. Copacabana, and I go there every day to do TV, is incredibly, it's breathtaking to look at. It's incredibly central, the beach and whatever else. But it's also kind of like a Disneyland in the sense that all the Brazilians have all moved out and they've all been replaced by members of the media and Danny Mills and people like that and fans hanging out on the beach, fans from other parts of the world, and it's all very middle class and so on. It's a great experience without the cynicism. You can feel it, but I certainly wouldn't want to spend 35 days there during the tournament. And I think in that sense, I'm talking about that's why I don't like Copacabana. But Matt's right. I mean, this is just something that envelops you. And obviously people have talked about the protests and whatever else, but there really is a very, very good vibe among fans, among residents here in Rio. And I say this despite the fact that I was there yesterday when 80 Chileans stormed the media center in Rio and busted down a wall and tried to get into the ground.
Right. Well, this is it. We're going to sign off from London here. Now, Gab's trying to tell you that, it's not all roses over there in Rio. There's Danny Mills, there's Chileans, but you know what? He's living the dream, and he'll accept that. It's been a great World Cup so far, and hopefully it'll continue that way. And we'll be back with another Google Hangout next week with more stories from Brazil. Thanks.